It was a Tuesday morning when my entire world collapsed and I didn't even know it yet. I was standing at my kitchen counter sorting through the mail while my 9-year-old son Alex sat at the table separating his Cheerios into piles by color the way he always did when something was bothering him. Bills, junk, grocery store flyers. Then my fingers stopped on an envelope that didn't belong. Heavy paper. TransUnion Credit Bureau. Federal regulation warnings printed along the bottom edge. My heart stuttered before I even opened it. You know that feeling when your body knows something terrible is coming before your brain catches up. I almost set it aside, almost convinced myself it was just another credit monitoring advertisement. But the envelope was too specific. My full legal name. My exact address. Not dear current resident. I slid my finger under the seal. The paper inside was thick, formal, screaming, "This is serious." And there at the top in bold font was a single sentence that stopped my heart. Your credit score has dropped 186 points due to multiple delinquent accounts opened in your name. 7 accounts I had never opened, credit cards from stores I had never shopped at. $23,000 in debt destroying my future, my ability to buy a house or get a car loan or do anything requiring financial trust. And every single account traced back to the same address. My parents' house. The house where I had lived for 2 years after my husband died. Where they still had access to my mail, my documents, my entire life. My hands started shaking so hard I dropped the letter. Alex looked up from his cereal milk dripping from his spoon. "Mom, are you okay?" I couldn't answer, couldn't breathe, because in that moment everything clicked into place. Every bill they made me pay, every emergency that became my responsibility, every time they guilt-tripped me into opening my wallet while they shopped at Nordstrom and booked spa weekends. It wasn't just taking advantage, it was theft. Systematic, calculated, years-long theft using my name, my credit, my dead husband's life insurance money. I grabbed my phone with trembling fingers and pulled up my bank app. That's when I saw it. The transfer from 3 days ago. My savings account, the emergency fund I had been building for Alex's future, was empty. $12,000. Gone. Transferred to an account I didn't recognize. I called the bank. My voice was shaking so hard the representative asked if I was okay. "Who authorized this transfer?" I demanded. There was a pause. The sound of typing, then the answer that shattered me. "Your father, Richard, is listed as a joint account holder. He had full authorization." I had never made him a joint account holder, but he had helped me open the account years ago, right after Aaron died when I was too grief-stricken to think straight. He must have added his name then, and he had been waiting, watching, biding his time until the balance was worth taking. That was 3 hours ago. 3 hours since I discovered my family had been systematically robbing me blind. And now I was sitting in my car outside my parents' house, staring at a text from my father that had just come through. "Did you get my message about the electric bill? We really need that payment today, or they're shutting it off." The audacity, the sheer breathtaking audacity of this man asking me for more money after stealing $12,000 from my account. But that wasn't even the worst text I had gotten today. No, the worst one came from my sister Brenda 20 minutes ago. "Mom told me what you're planning. How dare you accuse Dad of stealing when you've been living off them for years? You owe this family everything. And if you try to cause problems, trust me, we will make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. If you have ever discovered that the people you trusted most were betraying you behind your back, if you have ever felt that moment when your entire reality shatters and you realize you've been living a lie, stay with me. This story is about to get ugly. It's about to get brutal, but I promise you it ends with justice. Hit that like button if you've ever been gaslit by your own family. Subscribe because you're about to hear how I burned their house of lies to the ground. And drop a comment telling me what you would do if you found out your parents had been stealing your identity for years, because I'm about to show you exactly what I did. And trust me, they never saw it coming. Let me take you back to the beginning to help you understand how I ended up in that room at that table being humiliated in front of my own child. My husband Aaron died when Alex was 6 months old. He was a Marine killed in a training accident that made no sense and changed everything. One day, I had a partner, a future, a plan. The next day, I was a widow at 28 with a baby and a mountain of grief I didn't know how to climb. The phone call came at 3 in the morning. 2 Marines in dress uniforms at my door. The words, "I am sorry for your loss," echoing in my ears like they were happening to someone else, some other woman in some other life. But it was my life. It was my door. It was my husband who wasn't coming home. The funeral was a blur. I remember holding Alex, who wouldn't stop crying, while people I barely knew shook my hand and told me Aaron was a hero. I remember my mother standing off to the side, checking her phone, looking irritated that the service was running long. I remember Brenda complaining that the church was too cold and asking when we could leave. I remember my father giving a short speech about duty and sacrifice that sounded like he had copied it from a greeting card, and then immediately asking me if I had contacted the life insurance company yet. The life insurance. That became the thing everyone cared about. Not my grief. Not the fact that my baby would never know his father. Not that I was drowning in a sea of funeral arrangements and unpaid bills and a future that had just evaporated. No, what mattered was the money. How much was it? When would it arrive? What was I planning to do with it? I got $250,000. It sounds like a lot until you realize it has to last you the rest of your life. It has to cover a mortgage or rent or college funds or emergencies or all the things a two-income household was supposed to handle. It was supposed to be a safety net, not a windfall, but my family saw it differently. My mother called the day after the funeral. Her voice was soft, almost gentle, a tone I hadn't heard from her in years. "Sweetheart, I know this is hard. Your father and I were talking, and we really think you should come stay with us for a while. Just until you get back on your feet. You shouldn't be alone right now." It sounded reasonable. It sounded caring. I was so desperate for someone to tell me what to do, for someone to take even a tiny bit of the weight off my shoulders, that I said yes. I moved back into my childhood bedroom with a 6-month-old baby. The room still had posters from high school on the walls, a twin bed that creaked every time I moved, and a closet that smelled like mothballs. My mother said we could stay as long as we needed. She said family takes care of family. She said I was home now and everything would be okay. The first month, I believed her. She watched Alex while I went to the Social Security office to apply for survivor benefits. She made dinner a few times. She even came with me to a grief counseling session, though she spent most of it on her phone. I thought maybe finally she was stepping up. I thought maybe losing Aaron had made her realize how fragile life was, how important family was. I was wrong. The bills started in month 2. My mother handed me an envelope one morning while I was feeding Alex. It was the electric bill. She didn't say anything at first, just set it on the table next to my coffee and walked away. I opened it confused. It was in my parents' names for their house for $230. I went into the living room and asked her if she wanted me to mail it for her. She looked at me like I was stupid. "No, Sarah. I want you to pay it. You are living here, aren't you? You are using electricity, aren't you? It is only fair." Only fair. Those 2 words became the anthem of the next 2 years. It is only fair that you contribute. It is only fair that you help with groceries. It is only fair that you pay for the internet since you are the one using it to apply for jobs. It is only fair that you cover the water bill, the gas bill, the trash pickup, the lawn service. My father started keeping a list. He would update it every month, a meticulous spreadsheet of every expense that he decided I owed a share of. Sometimes my share was half. Sometimes it was all of it. It depended on his mood. I paid because I didn't know what else to do. I was grieving. I was exhausted. I was scared. And somewhere deep down, I thought if I just helped enough, contributed enough, proved I wasn't a burden, they would love me. They would see me as a daughter instead of a tenant. But the more I gave, the more they expected. Brenda started coming over every afternoon. She was going through a divorce from David, her husband of 6 years, and she needed a place to vent. By vent, I mean she needed someone to watch Chloe while she went to the gym, or got her nails done, or met her girlfriends for drinks. Chloe was 4 years old and had the energy of a tornado. She would tear through the house, dumping out toys, screaming when she didn't get her way, hitting Alex when he tried to play with her. I would spend hours trying to keep her entertained, trying to keep Alex safe, trying to keep my own sanity intact, and Brenda would breeze in 4 hours later, take her daughter, and leave without so much as a thank you. My mother said I should be grateful. Brenda is going through a hard time, Sarah. The least you can do is help out. She is your sister. And what are you doing all day anyway? You are just sitting at home with a baby. It is not like you have a real job. I didn't have a real job because I was taking care of a baby and applying for work and attending grief counseling and trying to figure out how to exist in a world that no longer made sense. But my mother didn't see it that way. She saw me as lazy, as entitled as someone who needed to contribute more. So I found a job. 2 jobs, actually. I started working as an office manager for a small marketing firm during the day, and I did freelance bookkeeping at night after Alex went to bed. I was making enough to cover my share of the bills and start putting a little bit away for an apartment of my own. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was proving myself. But the bills got bigger. My father started adding things that made no sense. A plumber came to fix the upstairs toilet. He handed me a bill for $400. "That is your bathroom, Sarah. You pay for it." Except I barely used that bathroom because I was on the first floor with Alex trying not to disturb anyone. The roof needed repairs. My father decided I owed a third of the cost because I lived under that roof. $1,800. The driveway needed to be repaved. Another $1,200. My share, of course. I started to notice things. My mother would come home from shopping trips with bags from Nordstrom and Anthropologie, expensive candles and throw pillows and decorative bowls that served no purpose. She would talk about the spa day she and Brenda had gone to the resort they were planning to visit in the spring, the new furniture she was thinking about buying for the living room. And then, in the same breath, she would sigh and say, "Money is just so tight right now. I don't know how we are going to make it through the winter." I wanted to ask how money could be tight when she was buying $200 candles, but I didn't. I just wrote another check. Brenda's divorce finalized after a year. She got the house full custody of Chloe and a child support payment that she immediately claimed wasn't enough. "David is such a cheapskate," she would say. "He is barely giving me anything. How am I supposed to survive?" She would show up at my parents' house crying about how broke she was, how she couldn't afford Chloe's dance lessons or new school clothes or the vacation she had promised her daughter. And my mother would look at me pointedly until I offered to help. I paid for Chloe's dance recital costume. I paid for her school supplies. I paid for a weekend trip to an amusement park because Brenda said Chloe needed something to cheer her up after the trauma of the divorce. I paid and paid and paid, and nobody ever said thank you. Nobody ever asked if I could afford it. Nobody ever seemed to remember that I was a widow with a toddler trying to build a life from the ashes of the one I had lost. When Alex turned 2, I told my parents I was ready to move out. I had found a small apartment near his preschool. It wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms and a galley kitchen, but it was affordable and it was ours. My mother's face went cold. "You are just going to abandon us after everything we have done for you. We took you in when you had nowhere else to go. We supported you, and this is how you repay us." I tried to explain that I wasn't abandoning anyone, that I just needed my own space, that it was time. But she wouldn't hear it. She called me selfish, ungrateful, heartless. My father said I was making a huge mistake, that I couldn't afford to live on my own, that I would come crawling back within 6 months. Brenda said I was setting a terrible example for Alex, teaching him that it was okay to walk away from family. But I moved out anyway, and for a few months, it was glorious. I decorated the apartment exactly how I wanted. I cooked meals that Alex and I actually liked instead of bland casseroles my mother insisted on. I went to bed without listening to my father watch Fox News at full volume until midnight. I felt like I could breathe. Then the calls started. My mother needed help with the electric bill. "Just this once, Sarah. The furnace broke and it is going to be so expensive to fix. Can you chip in? Brenda's car needed new brakes. She didn't have the money and she needed to be able to drive Chloe to school. Could I cover it?" My father sent me photos of overdue notices, medical bills, credit card statements. He never asked. He just sent them, and I understood what was expected. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself they were really struggling, that I was in a better position now, that family helps family. So I kept paying. $50 here, $200 there, $1,000 when things got really bad. I started cutting back on groceries. I stopped buying clothes for myself. I canceled the streaming services and the gym membership and the little luxuries I had allowed myself. I told Alex we couldn't do the things other kids did, couldn't go to the movies or the trampoline park or the zoo because Mommy had to save money. He never complained, never asked why, just nodded with those big brown eyes that looked so much like Aaron's. I started doing freelance work again, staying up until 2 in the morning balancing spreadsheets for clients I found on Upwork, making an extra $300 or $400 a month that immediately went to my family. I was so tired I could barely think straight. I started making mistakes at my day job. My boss pulled me aside and asked if everything was okay at home. I lied and said it was fine. At Christmas, the first year I was out on my own, I bought gifts for everyone. I spent money I didn't have on things I knew they wanted. A cashmere scarf for my mother, a gadget for my father, expensive art supplies for Chloe, a wine club membership for Brenda. I wrapped them carefully added handwritten cards, drove over on Christmas Eve with Alex in his nicest outfit. When we walked in, there was a pile of gifts under the tree. Alex's eyes lit up. But when we started opening presents, I realized something. There was nothing for me, not a single box. My mother said they had decided not to do adult gifts this year, that it was just too expensive. But Brenda had received a designer purse. My father had gotten a new tablet, and Alex got a pack of crayons and a coloring book, the kind you buy at a dollar store. I smiled and thanked them and acted like it was fine. Alex was too young to understand, too focused on his new crayons. But I felt it, that confirmation that I didn't matter, that I was there to give, not to receive. The following summer, Brenda called me at work hysterical. She had been evicted from her house. The bank had foreclosed because she hadn't been paying the mortgage. She had nowhere to go, no money, no plan. I asked her what happened to the child support David had been sending. She got defensive. "That barely covers groceries, Sarah. You don't understand how expensive it is to raise a child." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to remind her that I was raising a child too on half her income, while also bankrolling her life and my parents' lives. But I didn't. I just asked her what she needed. She moved back in with my parents, and within a week, my father was calling me about how expensive it was to have 3 extra people in the house. The water bill had doubled. The grocery bill was out of control. Chloe needed new shoes, a new backpack, school registration fees. "I need you to step up, Sarah. Brenda is in crisis. This is what family does." I stepped up. I paid for Chloe's school registration. I sent money for groceries every week. I covered a portion of the utility bills. I cashed out part of my retirement fund, took the penalty because I had nothing else left to give. My savings account, the one I had been building for emergencies for Alex's future, for the possibility of going back to school someday, was down to $300. I started seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Patel, and she had kind eyes and a way of asking questions that made me realize how insane my life had become. She asked me how much money I had given my family over the past 3 years. I didn't know. I had never added it up. So I went home and went through my bank statements, every transaction, every check, every Venmo transfer. The total was $68,000. $68,000 in 3 years, more than a quarter of the life insurance money Aaron had left me, more than I had spent on myself and Alex combined. Dr. Patel asked me what I was getting in return. I said I was keeping my family afloat. She asked me if they had ever kept me afloat. I didn't have an answer. She asked me what would happen if I said no. I told her I didn't know. I had never said no. She asked me why not. I said because they were family, because they needed me, because I didn't want to be the kind of person who turned her back on people she loved. She asked me if they loved me back. I started crying and couldn't stop. That session changed something in me. Not all at once, not in some dramatic revelation, but a slow, creeping realization that I was being used, that love doesn't demand endless sacrifice, that family isn't supposed to make you feel like you are drowning. But I still wasn't ready to stop. Not yet, because as much as I was starting to understand what was happening, I still wanted to believe it could change. I still wanted to believe that if I just explained myself better, set clearer boundaries, asked more directly for what I needed, they would understand. They would change. They would finally see me. I tried. I really did. I started saying things like, "I can't afford to help this month," or "I need to focus on my own bills right now." My mother would sigh long and heavy and say, "I understand, Sarah." "We will figure it out. Don't worry about us." But then my father would send me screenshots of account balances in the red of shut-off notices of collection letters. And I would break every single time. Brenda was the worst. She had a way of making me feel like I was punishing Chloe, not her. "You know Chloe's birthday is coming up. I can't afford to throw her a party. I guess she just won't have one this year. She is going to be so disappointed." And I would cave because the thought of a 6-year-old girl being sad on her birthday felt like my fault. So I would pay for the party, the decorations, the cake, the bouncy house, the goodie bags. And Chloe would have her party, and Brenda would post 100 photos on Facebook about what an amazing mom she was, and I would sit at home eating ramen because I couldn't afford groceries that week. The breaking point started small. It was a Tuesday in November, 2 months before that disastrous Christmas dinner. I got a call from my credit card company. There was suspicious activity on my account. Charges in Florida. I lived in Colorado. I told them I hadn't made those charges, that someone must have stolen my information. They froze the account and opened an investigation. A week later, I got a letter. The charges were from a resort in Miami. 5 nights premium suite spa services room service. $6,200. The name on the reservation was Brenda Clark, my sister. She had used my credit card to take Chloe on vacation. I called her. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding annoyed. "What, Sarah, I am in the middle of something." I asked her about the charges. She laughed. "Oh, that. Yeah, I borrowed your card. I saw it sitting on Mom's counter when I was there last month. I figured you wouldn't mind." Chloe really needed a break. She has been so stressed with school. I told her she had stolen from me. She scoffed. "Stolen? Oh my God, Sarah, you are so dramatic. It is not stealing when it is family. Besides, you have money. You are always complaining about your life, but you have a job and an apartment, and you are fine. I actually need help. There is a difference." I told her she needed to pay me back. She said she would eventually when she got her tax refund. That was 4 months away. I told her I couldn't wait that long. She told me I was being selfish and hung up on me. I reported it to the credit card company as fraud. They reversed the charges after I provided documentation proving I was in Colorado during the dates in question. But something broke in me that day. Something that had been cracking for years finally shattered. I realized Brenda didn't see me as a sister. She saw me as a resource, and my parents were the same. I was a bank account with a heartbeat. I started keeping records. Every text, every email, every request for money. I took screenshots of my bank statements highlighting every payment I had made. I documented everything. I didn't know why I was doing it, not at first. Some part of me knew I was building a case, preparing for something I couldn't quite name yet. Thanksgiving was uncomfortable. I went to my parents' house because I didn't want Alex to miss out, but I felt like a stranger. My mother made passive-aggressive comments about how I looked tired, how I should take better care of myself, how it must be nice to have such an easy life. Brenda ignored me unless she needed something. My father sat in his recliner, barely speaking to anyone, occasionally looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. Disappointment, maybe. Or resentment. I left early, claiming Alex wasn't feeling well, and spent the rest of the night on my couch, wondering why I kept putting myself through this. Then came Christmas. My mother had called me 2 weeks before asking me to come early to help cook. I tried to say no, but she guilt-tripped me into it. "Nobody else is willing to help Sarah. Brenda has her hands full with Chloe. Your father certainly isn't going to do it. I guess I will just have to do everything myself like always." So I went. I arrived at 9 in the morning with Alex and a bag of ingredients I had bought with money I didn't have. I spent the next 4 hours in the kitchen making side dishes and desserts while my mother directed me like a drill sergeant. Brenda sat in the living room with a glass of wine, scrolling through her phone, occasionally yelling at Chloe to stop doing whatever she was doing. My father watched football in his study. Alex sat at the kitchen table, coloring quiet and patient, and I felt a wave of guilt that he had to spend his Christmas morning like this. Dinner was at 2. We sat around the table and my mother said grace. She thanked God for family, for blessings, for abundance. I stared at the green bean casserole I had made and thought about how I had overdrafted my account to buy the ingredients. I thought about the check engine light in my car that I couldn't afford to have looked at. I thought about the email I had gotten that morning from Alex's school about an overdue lunch account balance. Brenda started talking about Chloe's private school. She had enrolled her daughter in an expensive academy across town, one that cost more per year than I made in 6 months. She went on and on about the curriculum, the facilities, the opportunities Chloe would have. My mother kept nodding approvingly. My father actually smiled, one of his rare shows of emotion. And then Brenda looked at me. "You know, Sarah, if you wanted to help out with tuition, I wouldn't say no. I could use the support. Every little bit helps." I felt something cold settle in my chest. I looked at her, at my mother, at my father. None of them seemed to think there was anything wrong with what she had just said. None of them saw me as a person with my own struggles, my own child to raise, my own life to fund. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could, Chloe spoke. She pointed at Alex, her face twisted in a smirk that was too adult for a 9-year-old. "Grandma Eleanor told me Alex is the son of the help. I bet he is not even your real kid, Aunt Sarah." The room went silent for a fraction of a second, and then my mother laughed. Not a small laugh, not an uncomfortable laugh, but a loud, genuine laugh like it was the funniest thing she had ever heard. Brenda joined in, nearly choking on her wine. My father didn't laugh, but he didn't say anything either. He just kept eating fork to mouth like nothing had happened. Alex's hand found mine under the table. He squeezed so hard it hurt. I looked at him and saw tears pooling in his eyes, and something in me snapped. Not broke, not cracked. Snapped. Clean and sharp and final. I stood up. I didn't push my chair back dramatically. I didn't announce I was leaving. I didn't yell or cry or make a scene. I just stood up, took Alex's hand, and walked toward the door. My mother called after me, laughter still in her voice. "Oh, come on, Sarah, don't be so sensitive. It is just a joke. We are just having fun." I didn't turn around. I didn't say a word. I walked out of that house, got into my car, and drove. Alex cried quietly next to me, asking me questions I couldn't answer yet. Is what Chloe said true? Why did Grandma laugh? Do they not like us? I told him we would talk about it when we got somewhere safe, somewhere warm, somewhere far away from people who thought cruelty was a joke. I drove through the snowstorm for 2 hours, white-knuckling the steering wheel, my mind racing. I drove to the only place that had ever felt like home, my grandmother Evelyn's house. Evelyn was my father's mother, but she had never acted like the rest of them. She was 81 years old, tiny and fierce with silver hair she kept in a practical bob and eyes that missed nothing. She had married Frank 20 years ago after my grandfather died, and Frank was everything my father wasn't. Warm, loud, unpretentious. He wore flannel pajamas year-round, collected vintage beer steins, and had a laugh that could shake the walls. Their house was a rambling old farmhouse an hour outside Denver, and it smelled like cinnamon rolls and wood smoke and safety. When I pulled into the driveway, Frank opened the door before I even got out of the car. He took one look at my face and yelled for Evelyn. His voice was booming but gentle. "Ev, we got a situation here." Evelyn appeared in the doorway barefoot on the freezing porch, and she didn't ask questions. She just opened her arms, and I collapsed into them. I cried so hard I thought I might break. Alex clung to my leg, and Frank scooped him up, carried him inside, and set him up on the couch with hot chocolate and biscuit, their fat old beagle. And Evelyn held me while I shattered. When I could finally breathe again, I told her everything. Not just about that night, but about all of it. The bills, the money, the credit card fraud, the years of being treated like an ATM machine with a pulse. I told her about the life insurance money, how much of it was gone, how I had nothing left to show for it. I told her I felt stupid, weak, pathetic for letting it go on so long. I told her I didn't know how to stop. Evelyn listened to all of it. She didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes, didn't tell me it would be okay. She just listened, and when I was done, she said, "I have something for you. Wait here." She disappeared into her bedroom and came back with a manila envelope. It was thick, stuffed with papers. She handed it to me and said, "Open it." Inside were property papers, a deed, a title, to a 2-bedroom condo 3 blocks from Alex's school, paid in full. No mortgage, no strings. My name was already on it. There was a sticky note on the key that said, "You deserve this 100 times over." I stared at it, unable to process what I was seeing. I looked at Evelyn and she just smiled. "Consider it an early inheritance. Consider yourself free." I tried to argue. I tried to tell her it was too much, that I couldn't accept it, that she should save it for her retirement, or for my father, or for someone who actually deserved it. She cut me off. Your father doesn't need my money. He has plenty of his own. He just spends it poorly and expects other people to fix his mistakes. And as for deserving it, you are the only one in this family who has ever deserved anything from me. You take it. You take your boy and you start over and you don't look back. But she wasn't done. She picked up her phone, put it on speaker, and called my mother. The phone rang 3 times before Eleanor answered, her voice slurred slightly. Wine, probably. Hello, Evelyn didn't bother with pleasantries. Eleanor, you are cut off. All of you. Not another dime. I know what you said to Sarah tonight. I know what you let that child say, and I know exactly how much money you have been bleeding from her since Aaron died. I have been keeping track. I know about the bills you made her pay the credit card Brenda stole the taxes you claimed her on when you had no right. I know everything, and it ends tonight. There was a long silence on the other end. Then my mother's voice icy and sharp. You can't do this, Jean. That is my son's inheritance. Evelyn laughed cold and hard. Richard already got his inheritance 20 years ago and spent it on a boat he never used and a timeshare in Sedona you visit twice a year. He is not getting another cent. Sarah is the only one who has ever been responsible with money, and she is the only one who is ever going to see mine. You want to keep your lights on, find someone else to pay for it. My mother tried to argue, tried to play the victim, tried to guilt-trip Evelyn into changing her mind. Evelyn hung up on her. She set the phone down, looked at me, and said, You have been trying to buy their love for years, sweetheart. It is time you stopped. They never deserved you. That night, I slept in Evelyn's guest room with Alex curled up next to me. It was the first time in years I slept through the night without waking up in a panic, mentally calculating bills and expenses and how I was going to make it through the next month. I woke up to the smell of pancakes and bacon to Frank, teaching Alex how to flip pancakes without making a mess, to Evelyn sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a smile that said, You are safe now. My phone started buzzing at 8 in the morning. Texts from my mother, calls from my father, voicemails from Brenda. I didn't answer any of them. Evelyn handed me a card for a lawyer she knew, a woman named Maria Soto, who specialized in financial abuse cases. Call her on Monday. Tell her everything. She will know what to do. By noon, Brenda had called me 23 times. When I didn't answer, she started texting. You can't do this to us. This isn't you. You are just bitter because your life didn't turn out the way you wanted. Then a few minutes later, we raised you. We gave you a home when you had nowhere else to go, and this is how you repay us. I blocked her number and felt nothing. No guilt, no doubt, just a strange weightless clarity. My mother left 6 voicemails. The first one was angry. Call me back right now, Sarah. This is ridiculous. You are acting like a child. The second one was panicked. The mortgage company called. What did you do? What did your grandmother do? The third one was manipulative. Your sister is crying. Chloe's tuition is due next week. How could you do this to an innocent child? I listened to them once, then deleted them all. My father sent me a text that night. A photo of a stack of bills, electric and water and gas, all with red overdue stamps. The message underneath said, Your mother is crying. I hope that makes you happy. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back, You had 9 years to treat us like family. You chose not to. Now live like we never existed. I blocked his number too. Evelyn had already moved fast. While I was sleeping off the emotional exhaustion of the night before, she had been making calls. She closed an emergency trust fund that my mother and Brenda had been pulling from for years, one I hadn't even known existed. She canceled automatic payments from accounts that had her name on them, accounts my parents had been using to pay their bills. She contacted every financial institution she had ever shared with them and removed herself from anything that didn't directly benefit me. She even sent a certified letter to Chloe's school informing them that she would no longer be covering any tuition or fees. I found out later that my parents had been listing me as a dependent on their tax returns for 3 years after Aaron died, even though I hadn't lived with them for most of that time. They had been collecting tax credits and refunds based on my existence money that should have been mine. They had also opened a credit card in my name in 2011 before I was even married and racked up nearly $7,000 in debt that they never paid off. It had destroyed my credit score. I hadn't known because I was too busy surviving to check. Evelyn had copies of everything: bank statements, screenshots, emails, texts. She had been watching for years, documenting their behavior, waiting for the moment when I would finally be ready to see it. That moment had come. On Monday, I called Maria Soto. She was a small woman with a quiet voice and steel in her eyes. She listened to my story without interrupting, took notes in a leather-bound notebook, and when I was done, she said, "We are going to bury them. Not because I want revenge, because what they did to you was illegal and they need to face consequences." I hired her on the spot. We started with a police report: identity theft, fraud, forged signatures. Maria helped me gather evidence, walked me through the process, held my hand when I felt like I couldn't do it. The detective who took my statement was a middle-aged woman named Chin, who looked at me with a mix of pity and anger when I told her my own parents had done this to me. She promised she would investigate thoroughly. Next came the cease and desist letters. Formal, legal, terrifying letters that outlined every illegal thing my family had done and demanded they stop all contact with me immediately. Maria sent them via certified mail so they couldn't claim they hadn't received them. My parents signed for theirs on a Wednesday morning. Brenda signed for hers that afternoon. I imagined them opening the envelopes, reading the words, realizing that I wasn't bluffing anymore, that I wasn't the doormat they thought I was. My father tried to reach me from a burner phone 2 days later. The number was unfamiliar, so I answered. His voice was different, smaller. "We all make mistakes, Sarah. Nobody deserves to go to jail over family business. Please don't push this any further." I didn't say anything. I just hung up. I didn't owe him an explanation. I didn't owe him anything. Brenda tried a different tactic. She showed up at my old apartment, the one I had already moved out of. She pounded on the door, yelling my name, crying about how I was destroying the family, how I was punishing Chloe for her mistakes. A neighbor called the police. When they arrived, Brenda tried to play the victim, but the officers weren't having it. They told her to leave and not come back. One of them gave her a warning about harassment. She posted on Facebook that night about family betrayal and toxic people and how some sisters weren't worth having. Her friends rallied around her in the comments, calling me terrible names, saying I should be ashamed. I didn't care. Let them think what they wanted. They didn't know the truth. In the meantime, I moved into the condo Evelyn had given me. It was small but bright, with big windows that let in the morning sun and a kitchen that actually had counter space. I painted the walls a soft yellow, hung curtains that weren't from Walmart, bought dishes that matched. I set up Alex's room with a new bed and a bookshelf and posters of dinosaurs and outer space. He ran around the apartment the first day, laughing, yelling about how it was the best house ever. I sat on the floor and cried happy tears. But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot, because my parents weren't going down without a fight. 3 weeks after I moved, I received a package. Thick, glossy official. It was from a law firm in Denver, one with a name that sounded expensive. Inside was a lawsuit. My parents were suing me for $48,000. The breakdown was insane. Reimbursement for childhood expenses, including food, clothing, and shelter. Compensation for emotional labor during my time living with them after Aaron's death. Investment in my future earning potential, which apparently they were owed for because they had raised me. And the kicker, a line item for grief support services rendered, which was their way of charging me for being a widow in their house. I read it twice, sure I was misunderstanding. But no, they were actually billing me for being their daughter, for existing, for grieving my husband under their roof. Maria was furious when I showed it to her. "This is disgusting," she said, "but it is also the dumbest thing they could have done. Because now we have grounds for a countersuit, and we have all the evidence we need to bury them." She filed a motion to dismiss and a countersuit for financial elder abuse, identity theft, and fraud. She attached every piece of documentation Evelyn had collected, every bank statement, every screenshot, every forged signature. It was a paper trail a mile long, and it told a story of systematic exploitation that had gone on for years. The lawsuit never made it to court, because 3 days after we filed our countersuit, Brenda was arrested. It started with the school. After Evelyn sent her letter withdrawing financial support, Chloe's private academy had conducted an internal audit. they cross-referenced Brenda's financial aid applications with public tax records and found discrepancies. A lot of them. Brenda had been inflating her expenses and hiding assets for years, claiming poverty while living in a house she owned outright and driving a car worth $40,000. It wasn't just lying on a form, it was federal fraud, financial aid fraud involving state and federal funds. The arrest happened at the school during pickup. Chloe watched her mother get handcuffed in the parking lot. The whole thing was caught on someone's phone and posted to a local Facebook group. Brenda's mugshot made the rounds on neighborhood crime blogs and community news sites. She looked haggard, pale, furious. Nothing like the polished Instagram mom she pretended to be online. My parents' lawyer called Maria the next day. His tone was clipped professional defeated. My clients have decided not to pursue their claims at this time. Maria asked him to put it in writing. He did. The lawsuit was dropped, but the damage was done. My parents' names were now linked to Brenda's arrest in every local news story. People started asking questions, digging into their finances, wondering how they could afford their lifestyle on paper retirement income. Evelyn hosted a family meeting at her house 2 weeks later. She invited everyone, cousins, aunts, uncles, anyone who was still on speaking terms with her. My parents didn't show up. Neither did Brenda, who was out on bail and avoiding everyone. Evelyn stood in her living room holding her wedding ring in one hand and a copy of her will in the other and made an announcement. "Every dollar I have will go to Sarah and Alex. The rest of you have already chosen sides. You either stood by and watched Sarah be abused, or you participated in it, or you didn't care enough to notice. And if silence was your choice, then silence is what you will get from me." She paused, looked around the room. Nobody argued. A few people looked ashamed. Most just nodded. They had known. They had all known. One cousin, a woman named Beth, who I had always liked, came up to me after and apologized. I should have said something years ago. I saw what they were doing, and I told myself it wasn't my business. I am sorry. I didn't know what to say, so I just thanked her. It felt hollow. Sorry didn't give me back the money, the time, the years of my life I had wasted trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it. My parents sent me one last message. It came from my mother's phone, but I knew they had written it together. "If this is how it is going to be, then we are done. Don't show up when she dies. Don't pretend you care. And don't expect anything from us ever again." Then they blocked me. I stared at the screen for a long time, the words, "This contact is no longer available," glowing in the dim light of my bedroom. Part of me felt relieved, but part of me felt sad. Not for them, but for the parents I had always wanted them to be. The parents they never were. In the weeks that followed, I started to rebuild. Really rebuild, not just survive. I enrolled Alex in therapy to help him process everything that had happened. I started going to therapy twice a week instead of once. I applied for every assistance program I qualified for as a military widow, and actually received help for the first time in years. I paid off my debts, the ones that were actually mine, and started rebuilding my credit. Evelyn took Alex and me to her cabin in Colorado for a week. It was a small place tucked into the mountains, surrounded by pine trees and silence. We spent our days hiking and building fires and playing board games. No phones, no internet, no drama. Just us. Alex laughed more that week than I had heard him laugh in years. He built a snowman with Frank roasted marshmallows until he was sick, slept like a rock every night. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. When we came back to the condo, I made changes. I painted the walls colors I actually liked, hung photos of Aaron so Alex would grow up knowing his father's face, bought furniture that was comfortable instead of cheap. I started cooking real meals, not just boxed macaroni and ramen. I joined a book club at the library. I went on walks without my phone just to clear my head. I started living instead of just surviving. Frank built Alex a treehouse in the backyard of the Colorado cabin. It took him all summer, and when it was done, it had a zip line and a rope ladder and a lookout tower. Alex named it Fort Alex and declared it the best thing anyone had ever made for him. Frank just grinned and said, "Every kid needs a place to be a pirate." Evelyn started teaching Alex to cook. She said it was an essential life skill, and he was never too young to learn. They made cookies and casseroles and one memorable lasagna that was so bad they fed it to Biscuit, who also refused to eat it. They laughed about it for weeks. Then 6 months after everything exploded, I got a phone call. It was David, Brenda's ex-husband. He sounded exhausted. "Sarah, I need to talk to you." I almost hung up, but something in his voice stopped me. He said he knew what Brenda had been doing. He said he had found documents, emails, records of her spending and lying and manipulating everyone around her. He said he was filing for full custody of Chloe because Brenda was spiraling, drinking again, blaming everyone but herself. He said he was worried Chloe was going to get hurt either emotionally or physically, and he needed evidence. I told him I would help, not for Brenda, but for Chloe. Because as cruel as that little girl had been at Christmas, she was still a child being raised by a woman who was teaching her that manipulation and cruelty were acceptable. Chloe deserved better than that. So I gave David copies of everything I had. Bank records showing Brenda's spending habits, texts showing her lies, proof of the fraud she had committed. He thanked me and said he would keep me updated. The custody battle was brutal. Brenda fought hard, hired an expensive lawyer she couldn't afford, tried to paint David as an unfit father. But the evidence was overwhelming. The judge awarded David full custody, with Brenda getting supervised visitation once a month. The last I heard, Brenda moved in with a boyfriend 2 states away and rarely saw Chloe at all. David sent me a thank you card and a photo of Chloe smiling, really smiling for the first time in what looked like years. He wrote, "She is getting better. Thank you for helping her." 8 months after everything fell apart, I got an email that changed my life. It was from a scholarship fund for military widows, something I had applied for on a whim months earlier and completely forgotten about. "Congratulations," the email said. "You have been selected to receive a full scholarship for a 2-year program of your choice." I read it 3 times, sure it was a scam. But it wasn't. It was real. I chose a program in nonprofit management. I wanted to help other military families, other widows who felt lost and alone and overwhelmed by a system that didn't seem to care about them. I wanted to build something that mattered, something nobody could take from me, something that was mine. Evelyn hugged me when I told her. She didn't say "I told you so" or act surprised. She just smiled and said, "It is about time." Alex hugged me so hard I thought my ribs would crack. "You are going to be the smartest person in the whole building," he said. And I believed him. I started classes in January. I was terrified. I hadn't been in a classroom in over a decade. I was surrounded by people 10 years younger than me, people who didn't have kids or trauma or a decade of baggage weighing them down. But I worked harder than anyone. I took notes like my life depended on it. I asked questions without worrying if I sounded stupid. I stayed after class to talk to professors, joined study groups, pushed myself in ways I hadn't in years. And I was good at it. Really good. One afternoon, about a year after everything started, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, no return address. Just my name and handwriting I recognized. I almost threw it away. But curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a photo of me and Alex from years ago, back when Aaron was still alive. We looked happy. On the back, scrawled on a torn piece of paper, was a single sentence. "You always thought you were stronger than you really were." I tore it up, flushed it down the toilet, watched the pieces swirl away and disappear. Because whoever sent it was wrong. I was stronger than they thought, stronger than they had ever given me credit for, strong enough to walk away, strong enough to rebuild, strong enough to raise a child in the middle of a storm and teach him how to stand tall even when nobody was clapping for him. I didn't crumble. I didn't beg. I didn't disappear. I just stopped letting them use me. And the moment I did, they fell apart. Because they had been standing on my back for so long, they forgot how to stand on their own. 2 years later, I graduated with honors. Alex was there, sitting in the front row with Evelyn and Frank, holding a sign that said, "That is my mom." I walked across that stage, shook hands with the dean, and felt something I hadn't felt since Aaron died. Pride. Not just in finishing the program, but in surviving everything it took to get there. I got a job at a nonprofit that helped veteran families navigate benefits and resources. The pay wasn't great, but it was meaningful. I was helping people who had been where I was, people who felt invisible and overwhelmed and forgotten. And every time I helped someone, every time I saw the relief in their eyes when they realized they weren't alone, I felt like I was honoring Aaron's memory in a way that actually mattered. Alex thrived. He made friends at school, joined the science club, started playing soccer. He stopped asking about his grandparents. He stopped flinching when other kids talked about their big family gatherings. He just lived free from the toxicity that had surrounded us for so long. Evelyn turned 83 and showed no signs of slowing down. She ran for the local school board and won. She started a community garden. She took a pottery class and made the ugliest vase I had ever seen. Frank hung it in the living room like it was a masterpiece, and she called him ridiculous and kissed him on the cheek. They were happy. We were all happy. I never heard from my parents again. No apologies, no attempts at reconciliation, nothing. Brenda's social media went dark after the custody battle. I heard through distant relatives that my father had health issues, that my mother was struggling, that they had to downsize to a smaller house. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, just a quiet acceptance that they were no longer my problem. One Sunday morning, I was making pancakes with Alex when he asked me a question. "Mom, do you ever miss them?" I knew who he meant. I thought about it for a long time. Then I said, I miss the idea of them. I miss wishing they were different, but I don't miss who they actually were. He nodded like he understood. Then he said, I am glad we left. Me too, baby. Me too. So here is what I learned. Family is not supposed to make you feel small. Love is not supposed to cost you everything, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop trying to earn a place at a table where you were never truly welcome. Sometimes the blade turns back, and when it does, you realize you were never the one who needed saving. They were. Have you ever had to walk away from people you loved because staying was killing you? Have you ever felt guilty for choosing yourself? Drop a comment and tell me your story. Hit that like button if this resonated with you. Subscribe, because everyone deserves to hear that it is okay to put yourself first. And remember, you don't owe anyone access to your peace.